What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since we did one of these, and I've been getting some questions about using Facebook Marketplace, so I figured now would be a good time to do one of these and try and bring you some of my tips for those of you that aren't actually too familiar with using Facebook Marketplace to buy a car. Now, when I was coming up, it was always Craigslist, and even before that, I'm not sure what it was because I wasn't old enough to be buying a car, but if people were using Auto Trader or things like that. But I do know, ever since Craigslist started charging to list vehicles, nowadays, Facebook Marketplace is the go-to place for buying a used car from a private seller. I would definitely say it's the standard nowadays, and it's really the place you want to be looking, especially if you're looking for something specific. So we're just gonna run through the basics today, how to use it, the best way to use it, some of my tips, and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's what you're gonna be looking at when you get to the Marketplace homepage. So you can either go ahead and right away search for what you're looking for right here, and that usually works out pretty well, or you can also go to vehicles first, and then you can get some more specifics here if you'd like. I usually like to just start with the vehicle in question, so we'll go Miata for example, and in my opinion it works best when you just search what you're looking for, and then the other important thing you're going to want to do is filter your location and your radius. So decide how far you're willing to go for what you're looking for, set that radius, and then you're just going to have to sort through everything it pulls up and narrow it down from there. And the reason I say this is because once you start filtering it down using the site filters, that's only accurate if the people making the ad actually put in all that information. So it is possible you're going to miss something if you start filtering down a lot. And a good example of that I'll show you, and this is very common, is if we go on this one, you'll notice it says automatic transmission here, and a lot of the times, especially with Miatas, that's not the case. So you got to pay attention to that, look through the pictures, because most of the time, especially on Miatas, it's actually going to be a manual. Either people are too lazy or they don't realize you can change stuff like this. You can see on this one immediately there's a lot more information here. It's got the number of owners, the fact that it's paid off. A lot of times they'll even have the title status here. That's a really good thing I like to check to make sure it's a clean title. Something else to keep an eye out for is the seller information. It could be a red flag if you notice that the seller information, they have just joined recently. There's no profile picture, no friends, anything like that. So do a little bit of vetting. There is quite a bit of fake profiles and things like that on Marketplace. Recently I listed something for sale and I immediately got a bunch of messages from profiles that had recently been created, and it was basically just spam. So just a lot of this is just going to be using common sense, asking questions, and looking for red flags. Which brings me to my next point, which is how safe is it to use Facebook Marketplace? And I'd say it's just really as safe as anything else like this. If you're going to be going to meet up with someone in person eventually to check something out, the high majority of people on here are legit and they're just looking to buy or sell their things. So really just use your common sense. If it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. Gauge how they respond to you. A good indication will be a well-written ad, so they have a good description, they have good pictures, and they're not hesitant to answer any of your questions when you message them. So when you do find something you're interested in, definitely send them a message. I like to avoid doing the auto response that Facebook Marketplace has in here, especially if it's something I'm very interested in. I try and make it a little more personal and put it in my own words to kind of stand out from all the people that are just doing the auto response, like, hey, is this still available? Is this still available? And once you start talking to them, you'll get a good idea of how the deal is going to go, whether the person's going to be easy to deal with or not, and if it's worth pursuing. So when you message them, the things you're going to want to be looking for are: one, is the car still available? Another one that's pretty high on my list is whether the title is clean or not, because if it's not right away, personally, I'm probably not going to bother with it. I'm just going to move on to the next one. I like to ask if everything works, if it wasn't listed in the ad. Maybe there's some things that they don't have pictures of that you want to see if they'll send you more pictures. That's another good way to see if they're really willing to work with you and get the thing sold. Miatas in particular, there's not a whole lot to worry about. Maybe ask about the clutch, the timing belt, The timing belt's not a huge issue. It's not too hard to do yourself, and the engine is non-interference, so if the belt does go, you'll be okay. If it's an early model 1.6, you might want to pay a little bit more attention to that timing belt service. If it has the short nose crank, that'll probably be something you'll have to check out in person, though. It'll have the crank pulley with 4 holes in it, and you'll want to make sure there's no play or wobble when the engine is running. Other than that, if it's all looking good and you want to try and set up a meetup, that's the time to do it. In the messages, get a date, time, and location set up. Make sure to bring someone with you. It's always nice to have an extra set of eyes to look over a car with you, and someone to be there that you can bounce questions off of. And then, especially if you're going to buy the car, someone to drive your old car home. Now, things you should bring when you're going to look at a car, especially if you plan on buying it, are going to be, I like to print out 2 copies of a bill of sale, one for me, one for the seller, and I like to bring a pen. That way we know for sure that somebody has a pen to fill these things out with. And depending on the situation, definitely can be a good idea to go ahead and bring cash. That way you can go ahead and snag it before someone else does, as long as everything checks out. In addition to that, you might want to bring a flashlight to look around the car and check it out. And you could also bring a code reader to check for any check engine lights or recently cleared codes. Now, something else I get questions about from people who aren't too familiar with doing this is going to be about the test drive. So does the seller go with you on the test drive, or do they let you take it? And this just depends from person to person. But in my experience, the majority of the time, the seller will just let you take it. That way there's not really any pressure from them. You can drive it, get comfortable with it on your own, check everything out without them there. And there's really not any risk because you're leaving your car there with them while you're test driving the vehicle they're selling. So they know you're going to be coming back. I actually really prefer it this way, honestly. It's nice to be able to check out the car without having that pressure of the seller being there looking over your shoulder. I did the same thing whenever I sold my BMW. I let the prospective buyer take it out for a test drive on their own while I waited at home. But like I said, this just depends on the person. But in my experience, the majority of the time, the seller will just let you take it. Now, the next step in the process is going to be the negotiation, and this is going to be different for every situation. If you're working with a set budget, you might want to discuss this ahead of time before you actually get to the car, and vice versa. If the seller has a certain price in mind they don't want to move from, you might want to discuss that in advance before you go and look at it in person. I know when I bought my BMW, the seller had a certain price in mind, and he was very firm on it. And I thought it was fair considering the car itself, it was a bit more of a rare model. So I knew that going in, and I was okay with paying that price. So I didn't have to negotiate on that one. I just went, checked it out. I thought the car was good, so I bought it. But a lot of the times the sellers are going to be open and expecting to receive negotiation. So whether you do that beforehand or in person after you do the test drive, maybe you find some things that aren't quite as good as you thought, you can go ahead and try and talk that seller down. Just mention these things in a non-confrontational way. Most people will be straight up with you and realize that the car is not perfect and be expecting to get talked down a little bit. And the rule of thumb with this is always to go a bit lower than what you think, because you know the seller is going to try and counter, and the goal is to try and meet somewhere in the middle, a nice happy medium. So easy example, if the car is, let's say, $6,000, you're willing to pay up to like $5,500. I would go like $5,200, maybe even $5,000. Seller's probably going to come back with 57, maybe 55, and you'll be able to meet somewhere in the middle. And last but one of the most important tips is once you've got that negotiation done, you got to handle signing over the title. And this could definitely vary from state to state, but where I live, we've gotten some difficult situations a couple of times where the name on the title and who signed it did not match exactly what was on the title, and they give you a hard time about this where I'm from. So I like to stress, really very carefully look over that title before the seller signs it. Make sure the name that gets signed on the back matches the name on the front of the title exactly, and make sure all the information is correct, there's no typos. Name, mileage, and VIN number all being correct on the title are going to be the most important things to look for. And once all that's done, you should be good to go, and you have successfully purchased the vehicle that you wanted from Facebook Marketplace. So some of the other things that are annoying about it is the results it gives you seem to vary a lot. This is where I like to have a friend help me search when I'm looking for a car, because we've had it here where we'll both search the same thing, and I'll get different results on my computer than my roommate will get on his, and I'll even get different results on my phone for whatever reason. It seems Facebook is kind of selective sometimes what it shows you for whatever reason. This is another reason you want to check every day, especially because there's always new cars coming up every day. But I think that is just about the gist. It's really not too difficult. Like I said, keep it simple with your search. Search for the car, set your radius, and I try not to filter it down too much at all. I just like to have it give me everything and I can sift through results for myself. Other than that, the most important thing is just going to be to use common sense, go with your gut, feel the seller out, and you'll be in good shape. So hopefully this could help you out with your Facebook Marketplace searches. If you have any questions about anything I didn't cover, because I'm sure I missed something, make sure to leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to help. I've got a few other videos on this topic I'll link up above and down below in the description. I like to discuss the Miata market on Facebook Marketplace periodically, and as we all know, prices on everything are up right now, including Miatas especially, and it doesn't seem to be changing a whole lot. There's some decent deals on here right now. They may have come down a little bit, but they're definitely way up from what they have been in the past, especially since a couple years ago when I first made the Miata buyer's guide video. I have made an updated version of that. I'll have that linked down below. But yeah, just in general, everything I'm seeing here is easily mid 4,000 and up. So right now you're looking at about 4,500 to 7,500 for a good NA. But anyways, that's gonna do it for today. As always, thank you for watching. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you in the next one.